Climate change is real, and activists call for lower carbon emissions. But how have Singaporeans kept up in this dynamic? A climate index reported by OCBC reveals that answers to be not much. The report finds that despite Singaporeans knowing a lot of the impacts of their lifestyle and actions contributing to climate change, they do them anyways. For example, 76% know of the damage that eating meat has on the environment but consume red meat more than twice a week anyways. More worryingly, the average Singaporean generates 8 tons of carbon emissions, which is twice the global average and incredibly far from achieving sustainability, let alone meeting Paris agreements. Further breakdown into the stats show that millennials talk the most, but pollute the most. Gen Zs are air conditioning queens because they are not paying for it. But for real though, 7 hours and more a day? You cold slut! Baby boomers are the most woke and consistent in their habits, which is ironic because they're the ones that are going to die first. So the big question remains, why aren't Singaporeans doing more? The top 2 reasons, number 1 being cost, number 2, convenience, which kind of makes sense. Like, if it's inconvenient, if it's expensive, not a lot of people are going to follow. But then if you dig deeper into the report, it also shows that the people that know that eating red meat is harmful to the environment because of methane production and the transport required to bring it to Singapore, 77% of them said actually they're willing to reduce it. But they should have already done so, according to their logic of saying that cost and convenience is the top 2 reasons of why they're not doing it, since meat, especially red meat, is the most costly protein source out there. So, okay. Other reasons include difficulty, status quo is sufficient, don't care, and individual impact is much lesser than corporate impacts. If we're looking at cost and convenience, this is something that will come along the way. But it's also something that Singapore has to kind of adopt and cultivate in them to create a change. If there is no demand for a greener option, then there will not be options for such. Some say that it's difficult to have such a sustainable life. Well, imagine if we are thinking of climate change as a moral issue, as a global issue, as an economic issue. Something that is difficult shouldn't be a justifiable excuse. For example, slavery. If you to get rid of your slave and you to do the labor yourself, it is also difficult. It's also going to be expensive. It's also going to be inconvenient. That shouldn't stop you at all. Next, they feel that status quo is sufficient. Well, when we talk about feelings, facts don't really care about your feelings. The IPCC report is out. We're definitely not doing enough to in our current state. More than 1 out of 5 say they don't care. Well, I mean, they should, but at least they're honest, right? And lastly, individual impact is lesser than corporate impacts. Okay, so while that may be true, right, it's kind of like sex work or prostitution if you think about it. Because even though you are not involved in the pimping and the exploitation, direct sexual exploitation of these workers, right, you're still creating a demand for it. And without that demand, these sex workers wouldn't really exist. So although, yes, it is not the bulk of the issue, but it is still an issue. Individual impact is still an issue. Now, there has never ever been a case where such a global and complex issue like global warming or carbon emissions existing to be solved by purely supply side solutions. It has to come from both demand and supply side economic proposals. For instance, you cannot just put a carbon tax and then expect all the problems of carbon emission to go away. People still need to use the computer, people still need to go to work, people still need to eat food, people still have to go overseas for their holidays, so on and so forth. So, what are the current supply and demand solutions that we have. We have so many, but divesting from fossil fuels is not one of them, and I'll explain why in my next video. Peace.